And we're back.
I'm happy to have Lori Barkus here. She is a family attorney in Weston, and Lori had contacted me basically and said that she was in favor of a lot of the things that we're doing at Florida Alimony Reform. So would you like to introduce yourself, Lori?
Sure, Debbie, I'd like to. My name is Lori Barkus. I am a family law attorney in Weston, and I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming in. You know, there's a lot of, we talk about he said, she said. There's a lot about we said, they said versus Florida Alimony Reform versus the leadership of the family law section. So, they claim that we have the most progressive laws in the country. And in fact, they came out today with an article. Karen Porras, the chair of the family law section, came out once again with more of her stuff, stating, I'm trying to be nice, stating that, we have very fair laws, et cetera, et cetera. And she even mentions that they hired a PR firm. And I kind of got a chuckle out of that.
She's mentioning that you got a PR firm?
No, they got the family law section.
Okay.
Got a PR firm, I guess because of the press that we're getting, because, we're getting press because what we're doing is looking for fairness and balance in the laws. They want to keep the status quo. And, I have two things to say regarding, before I talk to Lori, I have two things to say regarding Karen Porras. Number one, she claims to be so concerned about these poor little old ladies that are going to get left in the dust. All right? But number one, as soon as the money would stop, would she really represent them pro bono? Number one. Number two, I have all these papers regarding a case that she was the opposing counsel on, where there were a lot of things that could be questioned how ethical they were and what happened to the defendant in the case or the respondent in the case. So, I'm keeping this under my hat for now. I'm not going to state what was happening, but I want to let it out there that I have some information that I do.
Lori, we may have that duck, if you know what I mean.
We're not going to talk about that anymore. I mean, Lori and I don't agree on absolutely everything, but we agree on a lot of things. And one of the things that we agree on is that the laws need to be reformed. And, I just wanted to ask her a series of questions. Why do you support reforming Florida's outdated laws, and why do you believe that now is the right time?
Well, the current laws, as they relate to permanent alimony, talk about a traditional standard of marriage that I don't think really exists anymore. It's the idea that one spouse supports another and without any financial contribution. I don't think we see that as much. I think we have a lot more two-income earner families these days. And going back to that old standard, the idea was that if a marriage dissolved, you would try to maintain the standard of living. I don't think the current economy really supports that. I don't think most cases support that. And I don't think that's the reality. It's not the reality in the courts, who are actually moving away from that standard.
Well, the reality is mathematically you can't divide one and still have two equal parts. It's just not possible. But ironically, to give Karen Porras credit, she did acknowledge that when I met with her. So that was, that's a step forward, I believe, in working with the family law section.
Well, I got a question. If obviously marriages today live a lot shorter than they did 10 years ago. Okay, the average marriage, I think I was reading, was 7 years.
Really?
Today, yeah. That's what I read. Is it true? Not true? Who knows? But the bottom line is they are much shorter than 17, 20 years. My parents have been married, God bless them, 64 years. And you don't see that anymore. Too many pressures, too many changes, too many whatevers. The question I have is, should maybe the reform begin if marriages are at a certain age upwards, and then decide what to do with it downwards? Because it seems like everybody's in a tree about everybody who's been on this roller coaster now for the longest. And they maybe don't understand clearly, Debbie, what's going to happen after they've been 20 years on permanent alimony. Are they going to be left out in the cold, like she thinks?
Well, no. I mean, nobody that really needs it will be left out in the cold. I mean, that's one thing that, you know, we're not cold and human, hard people that we want to leave anyone out in the cold. The only thing we're doing is we're asking to shift the burden on the person who's receiving it to provide clear and convincing evidence that they actually need it. And if it's a genuine need, they can prove that. All right, so let me continue with some of the questions I have for Lori. And this relates to what I was saying about the family law section. Why do you think that alimony reform has been strongly resisted and even opposed by the Florida Bar and the family law section?
I think a lot of it actually has to do with fear of change. We're all creatures of habit. We all do things pretty routinely, and we have patterns of thinking that we engage in. And this is how it's always been. This is how it's been throughout everybody's family law career. It's pretty much what you know. If a client walks in my office and says, I've been married 17 plus years, I earn either significantly more than my spouse or my spouse doesn't earn any money, I automatically know that this is a permanent alimony situation because that's what the law says.
Right. But let me ask you this. I mean, let's play hypothetical. Suppose you went to law school in Texas, and we know that their alimony laws are very next to nothing. And in fact, the most you can get is 10 years of alimony after a 30-year marriage. If you were taught in that respect, how would it be different in terms of the fear of change?
Well, again, that would be what you know. You would approach each case differently because you know that the maximum amount of alimony your client will either receive or pay would be 10 years, and your mindset is kind of different as opposed to here in Florida where things are very up in the air. You know if a marriage has been a certain length of time and that the parties have a big difference in income, that it's going to be a permanent alimony situation. You don't really know how much, and all of those things kind of come into play because my clients comment on it a lot. There's a big unknown in it when it comes to need and ability to pay and how will a judge see it.
And that creates a lot of the litigation that you were talking about.
It absolutely does. That is one of the problems because most divorce cases settle, and my personal belief is they should if they can, because not only is litigation expensive, it hurts families.
But like you said, if you have a client that comes in 17-year plus marriage, you know that it's a permanent alimony case, so I'm sure you urge them to settle and swallow the bitter pill of permanent alimony, right?
Unfortunately, that's generally what you do. You can look at the situation, see if they can buy their way out of alimony, so to speak, some form of lump sum. Are there enough assets to do that? Is there something else the other side would accept? But you know that if you end up in front of a judge in a courtroom, you know it's going to be permanent alimony, and you have an obligation to tell your client that is what will happen. So,
right.
Yeah, you do.
So that's why cases settle and people, quote unquote, agree to permanent alimony. You know, it's interesting because we have a member of FAR who was divorced in Texas. She was married to an attorney, and her name is Cindy. So, Cindy, if you're listening, you know I'm talking about you. She did not receive any alimony. Her husband was an attorney. She's a flight attendant for American Airlines. And she and her ex-husband have a fairly decent relationship because there was no bitterness and fighting over the alimony. Now, she's remarried to a man who's a pilot at American Airlines, and he's paying permanent alimony to his ex-wife. And the bitterness that goes on between the two ex-spouses and the problems with the children, it's just unreal. So, you know, I'm not saying we need to be like Texas, but maybe that's another extreme, although I'm sure my fellow FAR members would disagree with that. But, you know, there has to be a happy middle ground for this. Right now it's just so one-sided.
Well, I got a text, Lori. They were asking me if you have a situation where permanent alimony is dissolved, then there's no alimony given for whatever reason is given, but there is child support. Do you think that because of the settlement, it will hurt child support monies given to the family? Because, it's going to go towards the whole family.
Right.
A lot of people say it goes just towards the children, but in the reality of life, it's spent on the whole family.
That's correct. Part of child support is supposed to take into account the expenses of a family, the household expenses, things like that. When you say permanent alimony is dissolved, I don't think...
In other words, if this were to be incorporated...
Well, what we're trying to do, and let me just clarify, is and this is a question I was going to ask Lori also, we're trying to make the default judgment 50% the length of the marriage. So if you're married 20 years, you would receive 10 years of alimony unless there are clear and convincing circumstances such as disability or something of that nature. But
would the amounts be affected? The amount of alimony? How? Because a lot of the complaints of the people that we've spoken to is that the numbers are just astronomical. I mean, 20 years.
The alimony or the
alimony?
Yeah.
It's astronomical.
If you don't receive, let's say a person is in a short-term marriage and they don't receive any alimony, but they have children, their child support numbers would be higher because that's based on a formula.
Right. Is that
That's
the way
correct.
it works?
Yes.
And if there was alimony, then the child support is less?
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay, so, all right, so it's just the opposite of what they were asking. If there is no alimony in the house, and the child support would be more.
The child support, yes, and the child support is not taxable too. So
it's not taxable.
Right.
Okay.
It's not tax deductible by the payer, and it's not taxable to the payee.
Huh?
Wait.
That's absolutely right. Basically, the person who receives the child support does not pay income tax on it, and the person who pays it can't deduct it. With alimony, if you're paying alimony, you can deduct that from your income taxes, and if you receive it, you're taxed on it.
So you don't take credit for paying it, and she doesn't take credit for receiving it. So
Exactly.
it's just a wash.
And don't say
Pretty
she,
much, yeah.
because I
Or
know
he,
women who
it,
pay child
it,
support.
Right.
It.
Women
Sorry.
are paying child support, and women are starting to pay alimony.
That's right.
That's another thing. Now, do you think that the litigation is slowed down by the process, that there is more litigation going on, more costs keeping it going? You don't want it demise because it's a business.
You're talking about the lawyers.
Yeah.
I can't
Because you
speak.
are a lawyer.
There you go. I can't speak for everybody, and it's certainly possible that is the mindset of some people. Again, I would imagine that a good deal of it is the reluctance to change, the idea of this being the way it is, and I think people are just very slow to change, very slow to think about it. I hadn't really thought about it much until I heard about the reform, and I heard about Debbie's group, and the more I read, the more I thought about it, and thought about a lot of situations of clients who are paying permanent alimony, the things we've discussed. I started to realize that there is a valid point.
And one of the other things that was mentioned in this article was how the laws in 2011 and really have cut down on the amount of permanent alimony being given and the litigation. But I received an email today regarding that from an attorney, and he wrote, and I'm going to quote him, he said, "I wouldn't say that Florida laws are among the most progressive in the nation. The changes enacted in 2011 still did nothing to prevent judges from making different rulings under similar fact patterns. What FAR seeks to do is to provide for consistency under similar fact patterns. In other words, any award of alimony would be the same amount and length of time no matter what judge a payer appeared in front of, absent of special circumstances." And I just wanted to get your take on that.
It's an excellent point, because right now judges have so much discretion. They're supposed to look at a case individually and decide how much alimony and how long, and that makes sense from a certain point of view, but what's happening is alimony awards vary greatly, and they will vary by judge. Some judges are more inclined to award alimony under certain circumstances than others, and if there were some standard, there would be at least some kind of certainty, and there would probably be a greater feeling of fairness.
Right. And I know you had a problem with my word fairness last week, but really it is fairness, because we want people to, on both sides, to have their needs met, not just to have it one-sided.
No, I didn't have a problem with it. It's just perception.
But it's not.
Because
it's
some
not
people
perception.
but this is why people
may
want to fight with you.
Okay, but no one's fighting us
Well, you know
except
what I
for the
mean.
family law section and maybe a few permanent alimony recipients. That's it.
Well, as the day gets closer to your achieving your goal, the fighting will intensify because a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, we have to stop this moving train. Now, I have received all sorts of letters and emails and stuff since we started doing this, and I understand how burdensome this could be, and it changes people's lives. I mean, you have a good point. Absolutely. And change is a problem. People in this country, especially this state, it's something about the water in this state.
And the weather.
They don't like change. They like things the way they were, good, bad, or indifferent. So I think that as this begins to get a life of its own, and it's beginning to, you got some good news that you shared with me before the show, and it's going to grow, and it's going to become more. I think that the lesson that I tell people is watch what Debbie's doing, because this is the way to get things done. And what you're going through right now is the way to get change done. As good as and bad as people don't want to accept it.
Well, we're trying to do it the right way. I get criticized, FAR gets criticized from everybody. We get criticized by the family law section, and we get criticized by people who don't think we're doing enough. And you can't please everybody, but what can I say? I mean, we're doing the best we can. We're trying to make fair change, fair being
fair.
Objective fair.
Objective fair.
Fair.
Absolutely.
All right. Oftentimes, the ability to pay comes down to whether or not the payer is employed or has the potential to earn an income, while the need is purely subjective by the judge. Can you suggest additional criteria or any alternative language for the ability to pay on one side and need on the other?
Well, I think one of the problems with need in a permanent alimony situation, need is determined at the time of divorce. And a person's need is based on what do they need to live, less what can they afford, and meaning what income do they have. Somebody's income when they've been out of work for a number of years is going to be at its lowest point.
Right.
At a later point in time, assuming the person is healthy and able-bodied, they should be earning more income. But if permanent alimony is awarded, there's no determination of ability to earn additional income, being voluntarily underemployed, anything like that. The person who's paying has to show why their income has decreased. It has to be through no fault of their own, but the person who receives can admittedly not do anything else, not work any harder, not obtain better employment or even full-time employment.
Or employment at all.
Or employment at all.
Right.
Absolutely. And can still claim the same level of need. And to me, there's something kind of unfair about that.
Absolutely. And another thing is, when a 401k or an IRA is split, let's say in the process of a quadro, there's no, and you brought this point to my attention, there's no requirement that the person has to preserve those assets. So when permanent alimony continues into retirement and the recipient has no longer has those retirement assets, because of their irresponsibility, their need is even greater. And what can we do to address that?
Well, again, you could address that by doing some form of a look back and saying, if those assets have been depleted, why were they depleted? If there was a medical issue, a job loss issue, circumstances beyond the person's control, okay, well, that's fair. But if somebody just decided to live above their means and liquidate all the assets,
that's the scenario that I'm
right.
talking about. That's exactly the scenario that I'm talking about. But if people knew that there was a limit to the amount of alimony that they would receive, they would prepare for their future, not thinking that they have this permanent lottery coming in. And I mean, to me, it's scary. Like, even when I was married, I always worked because I wanted to have my own independence and I wanted to have my own income. Let's say he lost his job. I wouldn't want to just depend on that. I like to have my bases covered.
What if he wanted alimony? Would you have? I guess I don't know what happened, but if he wanted alimony in that circumstance,
he makes way more money than I do. So
okay, so there was no.
No. You know, and this is a little bit of a controversial question. Should alimony payers be, and I say controversial because Lori and I don't agree 100%. We agree about 98%.
I like it that you guys don't agree.
Okay.
That's good.
Why? You want us to?
Yeah, I want to see where, I'm waiting for that part.
Okay. Should alimony payers be allowed to retire at federal retirement age?
I'm going to say generally yes, and I'll kind of go into one of the things we don't agree on.
And that means no alimony at retirement age.
Right. The idea would be, and I think a lot of people believe, or in some cases are even led to believe, that when they retire, that will be a change of circumstances and alimony will modify or terminate. And it's certainly, again, going back to that word fair that everybody loves so much, it's certainly a fair thing to expect. There are certain situations where if you have a person who is disabled or is not able to take care of themselves, not able to earn a living, those situations should be looked at differently. Under the current law, and there's actually case law on this, retirement is presumed to be a change in circumstances. However, first of all, it cannot be voluntary retirement, which means you can't decide there's more to life than what I'm doing. I don't want to work 80-hour work weeks and retire. Well, you still have to pay your alimony if you do that. And the other problem is that even at retirement age, there's cases that say that alimony should not be terminated if it leaves the other spouse in financial peril. And again, I would agree, if you have a disabled person, somebody who's unable to work, you shouldn't retire and leave that person in the lurch. But when we're talking about able-bodied people who voluntarily don't work, what we're saying is that you have one person who has to keep working past retirement age to support a person who can work and chooses not to, and that's unfair.
So you have to pay the alimony even if the person can work, but chooses not to for whatever reason?
Right.
Like, I don't want to go to work today?
The recipient has no responsibility.
I see. I think that's messed up.
They're imputed a certain amount of income at the time.
And
Sometimes.
who thought of this wacky law?
This goes back
This is
to
the
a long
June
time
Cleaver
ago.
world. This is Ward and June Cleaver.
Okay, so if I don't want to go to work, I get alimony, and I can keep that money train coming as long as...
Correct.
As long as somebody stays married to you for 20 years.
Now, what if I
working?
live with somebody? If I'm living with somebody, of course, I'm not going to say I'm living with the person, and they find out, they can cut the alimony?
Well, that's one of the problems, because there's something called a supportive relationship, and that is grounds for modifying or terminating alimony. But yes, it has to be proven. And again, if you look at the cases, most of the cases talk about 10-year-long relationships.
Right.
That's an awful long time to be paying alimony to somebody who's in a relationship. And it's fact specific. You have to prove that the people are living together. Are they holding themselves out as husband and wife? How are they sharing bills? The amount of money it would take to litigate that issue, to prove that issue.
So if you get a private eye and he's out there with a camera and he follows you around for like a month.
People do that.
But a month may be less money than 10
Freddie,
years.
I have a member, Eric Pearson, I keep mentioning his name. The judge acknowledged the supportive relationship in excess of the alimony and did not terminate the alimony.
See, then I have a problem, because then the law is very vague. How can he not if it says it's grounds for?
I have no idea what went on through that judge's head. But
Well, you weren't the attorney in that case, right?
I was not. But what happens is the standard is vague.
And he had to pay his fees for attorney and her fees on top of it.
So this is punishment? Is that what it comes down to? If I'm going to pay alimony, you're going to come down on me. So I must be the bad guy. So the bad guy is going to get whacked no matter what? I mean, punishment? Yes?
It's not meant to be that way.
But it is.
It feels that way for people.
Of course. If I could prove that the person lives with somebody else and you're going to say, you know what, too bad, that's punishment.
Well,
I must have been a bad guy.
That's one of the problems with it, because not only do you have to prove that the supportive relationship exists, then you have to prove the decreased need.
This is just a mental world we live in. No.
I had an email this week from a pastor, and his wife was in the marital bed with a boyfriend, and
that doesn't mean nothing.
Not only that, the boyfriend threatened to kill the pastor. So he feared for his life, and he left to live in another state. And guess what? He's paying her permanent alimony.
See, that's just mental. This is just
we're in a no-fault state.
Oh, this is here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I tell you, this is a mental state to begin with. How long have you been practicing law?
15 years.
And what do you do? Do you do family law, criminal law? What do you do?
Primarily family law.
Divorces?
An awful lot of divorce, custody, alimony.
And you've been on both sides of the equation here, where you
I
have the
absolutely
payee and the yeah.
Yeah, I've
Which
represented both
side
men
do
and
you
women.
like better? I'm only asking because I want to see how deep this goes. Which side do you like better?
I can't say that I prefer one side or the other.
You never take sides when you have a client and says, you know something, we're going to get this guy. We're going to make him pay.
No, because one of the things I tell my clients is it's not about making somebody pay, because there's a life after divorce, there's a life after litigation, and especially if there's a family, I want them to know that.
You got a call.
Oh, okay. Who is it?
We have Mike on the air. Mike, are you there? Mike, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I cannot hear you.
I hear him in the control room.
Can you hear me
I
now?
hear him in the control room. Can you put him up here? Mike?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. How are you, Mike?
Pretty good. Yeah, I've been paying child support for, I want to say 10 years now. And, you know, I pay a lot for child support, but I have to pay for my daughter's insurance and some other things. Ends up being about $1,100 a month. And I earn right around $50,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I got taken good. I just think, you know, it's one of those issues where no one wants to say it, but they realize the men are going to have to pay these women because they'll never, ever be able to earn what a man does. Am I saying that men are smarter than women? No, not at all. I mean, just because men have invented everything, run all the corporations, all the great lawyers, the great doctors, the great everything are all men. It doesn't mean that we're better than them.
Mike, Mike, let me interrupt you for 1 second. I'm in a room with 3 women, so let's be nice, because...
No, and I'm sure they're fantastic lawyers. Is that what they are? They're lawyers?
Well, we have one attorney, yes, and then I have my producer and my co-host, women. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
The bottom line is this. We have to pay because we know they'll never earn what we earn. As hard as those ladies work next to you, they will never be able to grind it out like a guy does. I know a lot of women, you go to Dunkin' Donuts early in the morning, and it is packed with guys on their way to work. And then the women stroll in around 7:30, 8:30. Men just work harder. Are we more intelligent? Well, I don't know. We've won more Nobel Prizes, and we've invented just about everything. We run all the corporations. Any important decision's always made by some guy. Now, the governments are different. Government's elected, so forget all these Nancy Pelosi's and Hillary Clinton. No, that doesn't count. They're elected officials.
I'm not sure if this is a joke or not. Are you
not a
kidding?
Joke. Why do you think the judges decide, well, make sure she gets her money? Because they know she's never going to go to mixing. And you guys concoct some story, oh, she was going to be an accountant, or she was going to be a model, and she would have made this much. No. Across the board, no.
But Mike, but we're talking about child support or alimony, because you're paying child support.
What's the difference?
Well,
There's a huge difference.
There's a huge difference, Mike. And
Lori, do you want to explain what the difference is?
Child support
so
is
a
also
woman
based on
can sit on her
standards.
couch all week.
Well, I understand that, Mike. And listen, I pay child support as well. I got 2 boys. I don't pay anywhere near what you do. I think that should be redefined for you.
No, because you know why? Because if I go to the court, she's going to tell my daughter, Daddy wants to lower the payments to you. Daddy doesn't want to pay for you. That's what she'll tell my daughter, and that's what all women do. Is they do that to their guys, and they'll go to the kids and they'll bring them down in front of their kids.
All right.
Oh no, I never talk bad about my spouse. Go ahead, ladies. Go ahead and say that.
Well, Mike, thank you for the call and the input. I mean, brother, I hear you. It's a tough world out there, but thank you for the call. Okay, and there you have it. Grumpy Monday.
I have no comment for that call.
Well, listen, he's upset. He pays a lot of money. $1,100 for $50,000.
Listen. We have women who pay permanent alimony to ex-husbands.
Absolutely.
We have women who pay child support.
Absolutely.
And whatever he does for a living, I bet I could kick his you-know-what.
Well, the bottom line, I don't even think that's really, I think he's just upset. I think the bottom line
You know what? He should be grateful. His child support has an end date. alimony does not have an end date. You know what the end date is? Death.
Well, I think, attorney, I think that maybe he should have gotten better representation. 50,000, 1,100. That's roughly. How much is that a year? 11, 10 is.
That seems pretty high.
About $12,000, $13,000 a year. That's more than a third.
If his child support is incorrect, there's an easier remedy for that. It's based on his income, her income, and the insurance and possibly the daycare. Although if he's been paying child support for 10 years, I don't think he has daycare. If any of those numbers are incorrect, that's a formula, and it's also based on his time sharing. So again, there's. He can go to court and fix that. I understand what he's saying about his child.
He doesn't want to because she's going to say, you know, Mommy, what's wrong with that? I didn't want to pay. And
right, that's a separate issue.
That particular case, Debbie, maybe that's what's going on in his world. Very upset. Does happen. And again, I don't think it's about women earning more, men earning more. I think it's just a problem.
Can you imagine how he would feel if he had to pay permanent alimony as well?
Oh my God, this guy would
he'd be in the mental institution.
He'd be up the roof. But you know, and I can't blame him. You know, 1,100 for child support, making 50 large. It's a lot of money. I would try to go in there. Maybe we should give Lori's number and he can call her and maybe.
I think he needs a male lawyer.
Well, maybe you can recommend a male lawyer.
Men are clearly more competent than women, and
yeah.
I might be sitting on the couch and not working.
We have to get
eating bonbons.
Bonbons,
right.
yes.
Sure, well, we got to get a man to do this. A man's world, Debbie. Man's world. But anyway, hey, listen. You know, when I went through my divorce, she didn't want alimony, and we settled, and it wasn't easy. And I'm not going to say he said, she said. Just wasn't easy. But
well, divorce is never easy.
It isn't. And I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you pick to do the divorce, you know, it's like Beretta used to say, don't do the crime if you can't do the time, because this is no joke. You know, this ain't checkers, this is chess. And you're talking about very deep anger for many years to come, as you can tell. And I feel for Mike, you know, it's a very bitter situation. You don't have control of your kids. Florida does grant women more than men, children. Yes,
on time sharing, not anymore.
Not time sharing, living.
Right, but time sharing would be living. Florida has actually gone in favor of 50-50, which is happening more and more.
That's one area that Florida is progressive.
Is actually very progressive, yes.
I know when I had a fight in my hands, and I didn't want to drag the kids through all of that. I said, sorry, I'll wait my turn and wait till they get a little older. And as you can see, Freddie lives with me, and Gio comes over, and our relationship is better. But I've had to incorporate my ex-wife into talking terms and things that we didn't do. You know, we didn't even talk to one another at one time.
Listen, divorce is hard, and
yes, it is.
It's very hard. I agonized before I filed for divorce for a long time because of how hard it is. I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. It just wasn't a healthy lifestyle for me with the person I was with. But before we have to take a break, I just want to ask Lori,
sure.
Is there anything else you would like to add in terms of FAR's efforts and why you are supporting FAR's efforts?
Well, one of the things I find most encouraging is the dialogue, is the sharing of information, and I would like to see that effort continue. Debbie, I know you're working really hard at this. I see all your posting, all of your information. You're really getting the word out, and I think that again helps bring change, helps promote fairness, and helps bring us to a place where hopefully people are less angry in the wake of a divorce and don't feel that this is punishment or something they're going to have to pay for the rest of their life.
Right, especially like that pastor I was telling you about. The fact that he has to pay permanent alimony after he was cheated on in his own bed and his life was threatened. That's just, lifetime alimony. Come on.
Well, that's just
she's clearly not disabled.
And again, Lori, and correct me, excuse my ignorance. Representation going into this game, is that the crux of the problem? Having people that will actually get you a better deal, or it doesn't really matter? Is a judge going to say, you caught her in bed with a guy in bed? Who cares? You're paying. Does it matter?
That part wouldn't weigh so much into it because again, we are a no-fault state. Adultery can be considered, but it's usually has to do with finances. But yes, you absolutely should have representation in a divorce. People are too emotional to make decisions. People don't know the laws because it's not what they do all day long. They'll get advice from friends or family members. And again, somebody will say, well, I paid this or I paid that. And as we know, everything's across the board.
So it doesn't matter what happened in the marriage. Cheating, no cheating, doesn't matter. And that has nothing to do with it.
No.
It's no fault.
This is whoever makes the most money is going to pay.
Right.
That's it.
And you cannot want the divorce and have to pay.
Exactly.
Well, do you have to get divorced if you don't want the divorce?
Yes.
You have to get divorced.
Yes.
Well, how's that work?
If one person wants out, that marriage will be terminated.
It'll take more time.
It might, because they might drag their feet and they might do everything to try to prevent it. But as long as one person says the marriage is irretrievably broken, a divorce will ultimately be granted.
Now, what if you get married, you want to get divorced because you want to collect? You know, you make it a habit of doing this. Can you get more than one alimony
Listen,
at
how
the same
many
time?
years do you have to put into a pension before it pays off? If you work
Into
for
a
the state?
pension? 15?
20 or 25, right?
Well, in Florida right now, you just have to put 17 years in a marriage.
Okay.
Marry someone who's well-to-do and makes a good living, and you have a lifetime annuity right now.
So you can actually do
It's a
this for a
business.
living.
Sure.
It is a
They should have
business.
a major in college.
Wow, this is really scary stuff. Can you get more than one alimony? Can you get 2, 3, 4?
No, because alimony will terminate on remarriage.
Oh, that's right.
Unless
that's
it's
right.
non-modifiable, right?
Right. If you had a non-modifiable term of years, then you could remarry. You could still be collecting the alimony. And that's one of the catch-22s that comes up a lot in settlement situations. Because if you want to get out of permanent alimony, the way you do it is you either buy your way out with assets, you do a lump sum distribution, or you agree to pay a non-modifiable amount for a period of years. But that means if your spouse remarries, you're
still have
still
to
cutting
pay
a
them.
check every month. Yes.
This is unbelievable.
I'm telling you.
This
and
you
was
want to get married again?
Well,
Are you married?
I am not.
do I want to get married again eventually when the laws get fixed?
When the laws get fixed, but they get you coming and going. You got to be very careful as to who you're getting married to. You got to
You
be
sure
careful.
do. You sure
But to
do.
live together in sin for 50 years, and then whatever happens, happens. Make a will and da.
There's always a prenup.
That's right. Isn't that make sense?
But Lori, even with a prenup, can you drag out the case and get temporary alimony for a very long period of time?
Boy.
You can, because the law on temporary alimony is a little unsettled, and there's cases that say you cannot waive temporary alimony in a prenup because it might make that person who would otherwise receive alimony financially destitute, in need of state assistance, things like that. So even the most well-drafted prenup wouldn't necessarily protect you from the temporary alimony.
You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, no, it's true. Here's a story in Weston. Very wealthy family, 3 children. The man decided to leave for whatever reason, I don't know. And the woman complains all day long. She's on the phone with her friends, complaining. And I know this story third hand, but from a very reliable source. So they actually shut the lights off in the house. Now, what this man did, I think, was wrong. And they shut the water and the lights off, the electricity. So they're living in a house with no water and no electricity, a big mansion. But, if you have 3 children, this woman should be getting a job at least to provide water and electricity for her children. If the house is in foreclosure, that's her ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-husband's problem. But she is probably being coached by her lawyer not to work, to keep her need what she wants it to be. And that's what the law is encouraging right now.
A lawyer wouldn't do that, right, Lori?
I wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
I
know
wouldn't.
you wouldn't, but
She wouldn't.
lawyers wouldn't do that, would they?
I can't say that one hasn't happened.
Really?
And that advice isn't given because, sadly, I would say that it is.
I'm in the wrong business. This is unbelievable. So let me get this right. You can actually, even with a prenup, still pay alimony. You can get remarried under certain conditions and still be collecting alimony. I mean, this thing is a multi-million-dollar business.
Yes.
So what you're trying to do is you're trying to stop a runaway train on the tracks to change the laws. And you're going to get a lot of people They're not going to be angry. And what's going to happen is you're going to get this done, because I know that you are nonstop. I can see it. And then you're going to get guys like Mike and all this who are going to say, wait a minute. Whoa, I've been paying this for 10 years. What's in it for me
Well,
now?
Mike's still going to
child
chase
support.
child support.
Well, I'm saying let's assume that it's alimony. Yeah, I know. He misunderstood. This is different.
Listen. In my other life, I'm a private detective. All right. We had a woman come out, permanent alimony recipient, complaining, "Oh, I'm going to be on food stamps." She's 51 years old, I think, if my permanent alimony ends. Well, I did a little detective work. She has a beautiful house on the lake in Boca. She belongs to ski clubs. She has lots of cosmetic procedures done, and she just spent some time in Jamaica. And I just found this out by doing a little work on my own. And this is the person who's going to complain, and she's just going to make herself look really bad. And then, like I said, I have the information about a very, I don't know what the word is, if it's, I don't want to say unethical. What would be the legal terminology where a lawyer does something that's just wrong? What would be that word?
Questionable
acts of Miss Porras.
Well, I got a quick little question for you, and I'm not going to use his name. You'll probably figure it out. I got divorced at the age of 34, and my ex-wife was 33 at the time of my divorce. I was married for 13 years. I have to pay permanent alimony to a healthy woman that has cohabited with her boyfriend for over 6 years. I went to trial to terminate or reduce based on cohabitation.
Cohabitation.
That one. Cohabitation, and was denied a reduction or termination. So you are right about the cohab law is impossible to use to reduce or terminate. What would you change in the law to make cohab easier to prove?
That's a tricky question. I mean, I'm wondering how somebody's paying permanent alimony on a 13-year marriage, although under the old standard of the gray area, I guess it could happen.
I know people who 7 years that are paying, which is strange enough. How do you get permanent on 7 years?
Well, the old law used to define a gray area marriage as between 7 and 17 years, which is now durational alimony. There was nothing a judge could do other than order a rehabilitative alimony for a couple years or bridge the gap alimony, so they would use permanent alimony. So one of the changes that actually was progressive takes care of those medium length marriages of 7 to 17 years. Now there's something called durational, so that those cases are no longer permanent. But
Lori, let me just say this: we have a lot of cases where they're still being given permanent alimony in the gray area.
It can still happen, yes.
It's still happening
Yes.
quite a bit.
It appears to have happened to this gentleman. Getting to his question, how do you make cohabitation easier to prove? Well, if you one thing you could do is put a prevailing party attorney's fee standard on cases like that.
What does that mean?
Well, that would mean that if you have to litigate the issue and one person denies that there's cohabitation and it is later proved, then you can seek attorney's fees from that person. The threat of the attorney's fees might cause people to maybe come clean, because the problem with cohabitation cases that become litigated is that people deny it.
Well, of course, you got to bring in cameras, and you have to take pictures, and you have to date it, and you got to put a newspaper up, and you got to actually get in the bedroom and take pictures, and do what you got to do.
There are cases where people hire private investigators because they want to see if somebody's coming and going, or they really living in the house.
But
what's
you
really
just
happening.
said it doesn't make a difference. The only thing that makes a difference here is income. If he makes more
I
income
guess
than
it
her,
would be up to a judge. Some
Right.
judges may stop the alimony if the cohabitation and supportive relationship is proven. Other judges, like a lot of the cases who come to FAR, because we have, the nightmare cases where the supportive relationship is acknowledged and nothing's done about it.
Right, because then you
You
go
get
back
this?
to the increased need.
are you getting all this? This is really something else. So it depends on the judge.
It completely depends on the judge.
So you can go
That's-
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Tuesday, and Thursday is a different judge. This whole thing could be upside down.
Well, no. When you file, your case is assigned a judge at random, and what is stamped on your paperwork has a very, very big impact on what will happen in your divorce.
And you know the judges now, don't you?
I do.
So
and
you would know what my odds would be, wouldn't you?
Keep in mind also, the judges are human beings who
They have good days and bad days.
Good days and bad days you're trying to predict, and I do believe our judges try to be fair. They do try to do the right thing, but like everybody else, they see things differently. And
that's tough.
That's kind of the problem. They don't have those standards. They have to decide need and ability to pay, and how ambiguous is that? How many people do you know that don't need more money?
But that's impossible.
That's an absolutely impossible one. Need is
you
always
sure
a given.
You want to get married? I'm only kidding. All right, Lori Barkus.
Barkus, yeah.
Attorney at law. Why don't you give us your phone number and website?
Sure. My number is 954-349-7988, and the website is www.barkuslaw.com.
There you have it. And that's family law. You cover everything in family, divorce, and all that good stuff.
Everything family related.
How is business, by the way?
Probably too good.
It's
too many
going
divorces.
very well, isn't it?
Very busy.
You know what? I read the Western magazines, and Lori's ad did catch my eye because she practices collaborative law, which is a really good thing. And if more lawyers would start doing that, I think it would also benefit everyone who's in the middle of a divorce.
Okay, and you practice in Weston? Is that where
I do? Yeah, my office is in Weston.
That's a nice area down there in Weston.
It's beautiful. I like it. Very suburban.
Not too much divorce going on. You got to get into Miami where it gets a little hairy.
No, there's divorce everywhere.
There's a lot going on. Yeah.
I tell you, it's a business.
Listen, I was walking my dog, and there was a car parked out in front of a house, and all of a sudden, a few houses up the block, a man walks out, running out in his underwear, carrying his clothes and shoes, running into the car. And then 5 seconds later, I see another car coming into the driveway. It must have been, the husband or wife coming home. So, and here this is in suburbia.
And you're standing there with the dog watching all this?
Yes.
Did you have a camera?
No.
Oh.
I wouldn't get involved anyway. That's not...
You never know. A little picture here and there could be really, really interesting stuff for a Monday night. But anyway. Lori, I want to thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
I'm glad you cleared up this and made this really... something that really has to be looked at, I guess, when you get closer, and you'll give us more info.
The more you learn, you realize
this is nuts.
It's crazy.
This is just ridiculous.
And the judges, although they try to be fair, they're following the current law, which is they have very few guidelines to go to
They're not following any law. Whatever they decide to do today is what they're going to decide on.
But that's it. The law doesn't have enough boundaries.
But the law states here are the grounds, and if you prove the grounds, they still tell you, nah, not today, maybe tomorrow. I mean, this is nuts. And Mike, thank you for calling in. I can sympathize with your feeling, and not the woman-man thing, but I can sympathize with the anger. All right, let's take a break. Lori, thank you for coming on, and we'll keep looking at your posts on Facebook, and you keep writing. And we'll see where it goes. All right. We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Lori.